Well, my firm, Loveland Patents and Trademarks, is a patent and trademark attorney firm with a number of clients in the agricultural sector. And we're very aware that things are quite difficult in this sector at the moment. So we thought it'd be helpful to seek the views of experts in what the issues are. Now, I'm joined by, I'm hoping to be joined by three distinguished panel members, but at the moment we just have two. We're waiting for the third to join us. So what I'd like to do is to ask each of them in turn to introduce themselves. We've got Amy Cowdell, we've got William Burgess, and we hope to have Mark Chatterton. So I'll ask Amy, please, first, if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, thank you so much for inviting me along. So I'm Amy Cowdell. I'm an agricultural partner at Shakespeare Martineau. I'm based in the Lincoln office, which is now fully open, thankfully. Our core agricultural team is based in the East and the West Midlands predominantly. We specialise in all kinds of agricultural property transaction work, on-farm property needs, specialising in agricultural tenancies and partnership agreements. And then we work very closely with our colleagues in the wider team, the wider agricultural team, with different disciplines that come to help us and assist with our farming clients.
William, thank you.
Hi there, good afternoon. William Burgess. I'm chairman of family business that produces root vegetables and potatoes. We pack and process and supply the UK retail market. And
Mark has joined us. Thank you very much. So Mark, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself now that you've joined us. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay, everybody. Mark Chatterton, director at Duncan and Topliss in Newark. So involved in agriculture for the last 30 years as a chartered accountant, and we've got a big team here looking after quite a few farming clients. We think we've nearly got 1,000 in the country, mainly in the East Midlands, but they're all ranging from small 2-acre smallholders right up to large agribusinesses. That's me.
Right. Well, what I'd like to do is to ask each of you in turn what one issue you consider currently threatens food security in the UK. I think I'd like to start with William, if that's okay.
One issue. I've got several, but I'll
sure
give you the first one that springs to mind is the financial squeeze on margins and return on capital. In my lifetime, the value of, the retail price of most of our products has actually gone down in cash terms in the last 30 years, and in real terms it's down hugely. I don't know the exact figures, but yeah, you can buy carrots today cheaper than you could buy them 20 years ago. And yeah, we're in a very competitive market. I think our products are amongst the cheapest in the world. We recently compared prices across Europe and we're way below prices in the EU. So yeah, that's our big challenge.
What's squeezing the prices then, William?
We seem to have a very competitive market, more so than in Europe. In Europe, there's lots of large cooperatives that I think in reality have more pricing power in the market than we do. But I think one of the factors that's really driving prices down is the German discounters, which, there was a recent article by Shore Capital looking at the results of their UK business, and it concluded that they were effectively buying market share in the UK. So they're running their UK business at very low profit, certainly, very low return on capital. And they're deliberately building their market share so that they get a stronger market position.
Amy, what from your perspective is the one issue that you think is important?
Yeah, there is several, isn't there? But okay. Well, I've focused in really on what we're seeing from my clients, and and how farmers are about to face a huge challenge, the biggest policy shift in 50 years. It's quite clear that the direction of travel for government policy is the environmental agenda. I think UK government have committed to protect 30% by 2030, the 20 by 20 pledge, and they only need 4% of that, but 4% is 400,000 hectares of land. So you can see that the scale there. But the current government subsidy, as most of us will know on this call, the basic payment scheme did allow farmers to weather the storm, so to speak, fluctuating crop prices and yields. This is due to completely end by 2027. We're just going through the transition period at the moment. I'll be quite interested to hear from the audience how they're being affected, the bottom line is being affected now. But essentially, it will no longer be possible to balance out a low-yielding crop year with government subsidy. So instead, the government's moved on into the Agriculture Act. We've got new subsidy regime of that, in my personal view, awful caption of public money for public goods, essentially meaning that farmers will be incentivised for putting their land into environmental use. And these range right from SFI, countryside stewardship, right up to the ambitious landscape recovery scheme, which potentially could take swathes of land out of food production. But how much farmers will want to buy into these schemes to circumvent the volatility that William was just talking about is yet to be determined. But essentially, farming businesses need to follow the money. And if countryside stewardship schemes are paying relatively well and it provides that steady income, then potentially it's a safer option for people, especially with these extreme weather conditions that we're finding. Another policy change that's happened or will be coming in mandatory is under the Environment Act, the biodiversity net gain. It's being introduced in January, and we'll just see 10%, a minimum of 10% net gain on biodiversity will be required for most developments. And whilst on site will probably happen with habitats, a lot of things will happen off site in these so-called habitat banks. And we're certainly getting involved with landowners, developers that are looking for putting their land into habitat banks. And that is taking land out of production, food production. There's low intensive grazing perhaps, but certainly not to the extent. And that's taking out land for a minimum of 30 years. So just the way I see it, that there's so many competing land use requirements that I haven't spoken about. There's the land supply issue, the energy security issue, food production, and now environmental. And it's how we try and piece that all together to get the good quality food in the UK. So
how are those issues affecting you, William? Is that impacting on you yet, the environmental and agenda generally?
Yes, I mean, I think the problem for us is that we work on a model of renting land for producing crops because our crops are on long rotations, 7-year rotations. But farmers can get a lot more money now to grow maize for AD plants or just turn it over to solar farms. And policies like that, on the face of it, yes, we're making more green energy, but what we're doing is we're exporting our food production capacity. And I would argue, if you really did the maths properly, we're not helping our carbon footprint, we're just exporting it. And so there's loads of inconsistencies in government policy, but what these do is they put the cost of land up for us. Mm-hmm. And so they put our costs up, but it means a lot more production is effectively being exported. And I think the real risk over the long term with current policy is we'll just export our food production and our carbon footprint.
Mm. Mark, how's it affecting your clients?
Well, as an accountant, we're at a crossroads, and the uncertainty to spend capital, I've never seen so much uncertainty now. I mean, the majority of our clients produce wheat as the main crop. I know there's a lot of veg as well and livestock, but obviously grain storage is buildings are being used at present is a substandard. You know, old buildings are still being used, and there's just an uncertainty to spend money on putting up a new grain store, and people doing forward budgets. It's just very much what, although there are good capital allowances. You know, there's the annual investment allowance of £1 million per year per business is still very useful for, you know, most of the average size farmer, and there's R&D relief and there's various things, but it's just doing a forward budget to get an actual payback on these capital expenditure projects, whether it's technology or energy saving or whatever it is. There are some grants available, yes, but they are, I just see there's a huge uncertainty at the moment about people wanting to invest in agriculture, with all the things that, you know, William and Amy have said as well. So I think food production is core to the most of these businesses. You know, we came away from cereals this year thinking that although people may have environmental schemes and renting buildings and cottages and things like that, if you look at the set of accounts, their core, their main, more than 50% of their income comes from growing crops on the fields that they own or rent in, as the larger agribusinesses like Williams do, and have a formula to make money on renting land in. But the competition is there, and so there's a huge uncertainty at the moment, really. And the next generation are coming back into businesses, and we get involved a lot in succession planning. And some of these 25-year-olds are very keen, but the wiser heads maybe are saying, is it right to be investing in all these in agriculture in the UK? So it's very worrying.
Mm. Is there an issue with sort of short-term tenancies and so on that's making it more difficult as well?
I think the market has always been there for short-term tenancies, and obviously the higher wheat price has pushed up those rental values, and as William said, it increases the costs for growing food.
Yeah. Amy?
I was just going to add to that, actually. Yeah, there is the short-term tenancy thing is something I think is just potentially stopping tenants, at least from investing on farm, because yeah, it's likely, you know, the average is 5 years or less for tenancies at the moment. Certainly, there's been the ROC report, some people might know about, consulted against whether or not they're going to encourage landlords to offer longer term tenancies to enable the tenants to do what they need to do on farm and invest appropriately. And I mean, there's so much going on with climate change and as you say, Mark, with grain stores or whatever it might be, you need that ability to grow your business and the security.
Yeah, well, William mentioned, I think, 7-year rotation, didn't you? And that doesn't work if you've only got a 5-year tenancy, I guess.
Yeah, we work on annual licenses, so that issue doesn't really affect us. But
okay,
yeah, it does on the arable farms.
Yeah. There was, I think, also when we were discussing this before, Mark, there was the issue of cost of capital equipment. You mentioned it in relation to replacing grain stores and things like that. I mean, is there generally an issue with capital available for machinery, for buildings and so forth that is more difficult now?
Well, it seems to have gone up an astronomical amount for replacing tractors and combines. I mean, where I was this morning, I think the previous combine was 2016, so, and it's coming up now, and it's just a lot more, and the cost to change. So the debate, most people have a 7-year or 10-year replacement plan. So the combine drops in every 7 years, and the sprayer drops in every 7 years, and they spread it to try and keep payments, annual payments on machinery to be a similar or slightly rising amount. But that has just increased a lot, and so the sort of strategy and why they're running the particular machinery fleet they're running is come into question because of the high capital costs that are there now.
There's obviously an issue. There's also been mentioned of the temptation to move the land over to solar farms and things like that. Is that something you've come across, any of you, in your fields?
Well,
Sorry,
nearly a lot of our, Amy will say the same, but nearly half of our client base have got options and are debating. And the income stream of £1,000 per acre per annum is far more than a gross margin or a net margin from producing food.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So the temptation is there that if you've got an offer, you tend to move it on and try and get it over the line.
Are there planning issues there?
Well, there obviously are, but the developer will take that risk. The developer will be doing the planning, not so much the farm. And there are some farmers that are doing solar themselves.
So it's not necessarily much of an obstacle then.
I don't know details. I mean, it obviously is.
If you've, it's actually trying to, and probably the land agents on the call might be able to assist here a lot more than us. But yeah, if you've got the grid connection, getting onto the national grid, that's the biggest part. And over recent last few years, Lincolnshire has just opened that up. It seems to have got a better connection, which is why swathes of Lincolnshire is now under option, and very, very tempting. And it's that. Farm clients are having a moral debate as well, because good quality land in Lincolnshire, do you put solar? But you've got succession issues, and it's all about timing and the right time to do things like that. But the investment rent that you're getting in can assist on other things, infrastructure or whatever, on the rest of the farm. So it's very tempting. But morally, it's difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Are there issues with labour? Thinking particularly of your business, William.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that. So probably our other big issue is, the crops we're involved with are mostly mechanically harvested, so we don't have all these field labour problems like the sort of brassica, cauliflower, broccoli people. That's a major issue for them. For us, we've got a lot of packhouse labour, and yeah, we employ about 500 people, and that goes up to about 800 at peak times. And we have, for the last 20 years, been heavily staffed by Eastern Europeans. So that's got a lot more difficult. It feels a little bit easier now than it was a year ago, but it's still a challenge. I think there's some big issues. I think the incentives to work in the UK just not strong enough. We often have people who say if they work more than 15 hours a week, they're worse off. So we do have a lot of part-time people who do work. We've got a packhouse near Kings Lynn, and we get a lot there that want to just do the 15 hours. But yeah, it's a real issue. And I think government thought we were just going to replace everyone with robots, but the technology, it's coming, but it's 10 years away at least, I think, from really seriously taking the labour out of our job. We have got a lot of technology, optical grading machines, and so we have reduced our labour significantly in the last sort of 20-30 years. But yeah, we've had the low-hanging fruit, and I think that the jobs that are not automated now are the difficult ones. And then if you look at things like soft fruit, picking soft fruit. I mean, I'm actually involved in a company trying to develop that, but I personally think it's a hell of a long way off. It's such a difficult thing for a machine to do. And I mean, there are machines that will do it, but they're so slow, and the cost of running these machines is way, way more than human beings. So yeah, big challenges there. Big challenges.
Yeah, we've been involved with some of these developments in robotics and so on, but it has been pointed out that however good they get, it's still quite slow compared to the skilled operator who recognises a ripe fruit and just goes and grabs it instead of having to go and photograph it, analyse that, and then, you know, do the necessary. It's still a long way off, but I think it's easy for sometimes the government to think, well, oh, we can bring in robots instead or something. But, so what do you think sort of eased things for you in the labour market in the last year or so then?
Well, I think coming out of COVID, it was particularly difficult because, you know, a lot of people were long-term sick or, you know, took early retirement, and but I think a lot of those are coming back. Also, I think some of the Eastern Europeans are coming back. We've seen a few, not a massive amount, but yeah, and I think I'm right in saying unemployment or job vacancies have fallen now, and I think the economy is slowing, so that's probably helping a little bit in terms of finding people. But yeah, it's still challenging, and people, there's a lot more sickness leave and things like that than there used to be. So it's not only hiring people, it's getting people actually doing the work hours.
Yeah, we're finding that with discussions with clients is that the paternity leave is now every birth, and you know, people are wanting hours with their children, and that's the thing. Not you know, the tractor drivers who loved sitting on their tractor for all autumn, but those are a dying breed.
So a real problem here then seems to be sort of low food pricing, and surely the logical thing in the long term is we've got to accept higher prices for food, and yet that's not happening, is it? Not in fresh food particularly, it seems.
No, I mean, food prices have gone up a bit in the last sort of year, 18 months. They've gone up quite a lot, but they've gone up from a very low base. And I do, you know, we're at the sharp end dealing with retailers. It's definitely something in what I said about the discounters buying market share. I think the danger in the long run, if the government allow Aldi, Lidl to get, you know, over 50% of the market, then I think the problem will be that it won't be as competitive and prices will go up substantially as they start to make, you know, proper commercial margins in the future. So I think at the moment, politically, they think it's great that, you know, they're keeping prices down, but I think in the long run we'll pay for it because we won't have a sustainable domestic industry if we continue like that. You know, because, you know, you go back to the solar panel thing. Why would you? And the other thing about our crops is they're very high working capital crops. So, you know, an acre of carrots costs about £4,000 to £5,000 an acre to grow. You know, you can grow a field of wheat for, I'm not up to date, £400 or £500 probably. So you're talking 10 times the cash outlay to grow the crop. And on top of that, you've got expensive packing machinery and investment. So, you know, why would you do that when you can just put solar panels on your land and get £1,000 a year with no risk? That's what we're up against, and I think government policy is worrying because it's you know, if I don't blame people for doing it, you know, it's the government policy that's wrong that's allowing it.
I was just going to add to that in
please
terms of the policy and the fertilizers and things like that. The prime example being OSR, oilseed rape, and the forgive me because I don't know what particular you will know, William. I'm sure the fertilizer was the pesticide that was stopped.
Yeah,
which makes it, you know, so difficult to grow in this country. Well, it's now imported in pretty much, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah, I was going to raise that point. So there's not a level playing field in crop protection products. The neonics is a good example. I mean, a lot of my friends telling me it's almost impossible to grow oilseed rape now in the UK. And then on the livestock side of things, you know, I think the standards of animal welfare and regulations that the UK producers have to meet make it very difficult to compete with foreign production. So, you know, these are all things that are increasingly pushing production abroad. And the worry is if we have other problems like Ukraine war or things that stop the supply chains from moving goods around, then, you know, we could have a serious problem with food availability. I mean, I think we're very lucky that didn't happen during COVID. You know, most businesses in the food sector carried on. There was nothing changed. You know, day one of COVID, everyone went to work and carried on producing. And eventually we brought in safeguards and things to try and reduce the spread of COVID. But for several weeks, they carried on as normal. And if they hadn't, you know, we'd have had a food crisis in the UK. So I think food security is a real issue. But the trouble with politics is it's you know, it's a long-term issue, and politics is always short-term focused.
So, Mark, Amy, have you had clients who've had to sort of get out of agriculture because it just wasn't worth their carrying on?
Yes. Yes, I was just talking to one last week actually who got out of it a year ago, and I said, "Gosh, I bet you're pleased." He said, "I'm just so pleased." Yes, but yeah, but there's varying scales, and there's so many different. Every client is different. Every farm is different. Every farming business is different. You're going to see a complete array of different things.
What about you, Mark? Have you?
Well, we've often seen I've been here 30 years, and the dairy farmers in this side of the country have got out, and there aren't many who miss their cows and they're working 365 days a year. And it's the same with the pressure of people getting out now. But yeah, it's few and far between. I mean, it's the succession planning where you can get the older generation, if they get a bit you know, not happy about the future, the younger generation come along with some fresh ideas. And that's still, you know, rather than being doom and gloom the whole time, there are some successful businesses that do pass the reins down, and they go off in different enterprises and still make a success of the core land ownership. And that's what we've got to look at to be positive. It's not, yeah, the businesses have got to adapt to being rural asset managers rather than perhaps food producers, without packing up. I mean, obviously packing up and selling is an option, and land has gone up, I think, since COVID. I think that, you know, there was the Dyson effect in the early 2000s, but that pushed the price up. But then we've had a bit of a lull in COVID, but I think since then the land agents will tell us that the average land price now is back over 10,000 an acre. So there are some businesses and some families that think that's worth cashing in on. So I think there will be more exits from the industry.
And again, that's not going to add to food production in the long term, I guess.
Well, a lot of people buying are the people who want to rewild and, you know, have lots of pretty flowers in the fields rather than produce food.
You've also got the speculative buyers in the market now as well. That's completely away from farming and sees the benefit and opportunity for natural capital. It's out there.
Perhaps at this point we could see if anybody in the audience has any questions or observations. We don't see any chat questions, but does anybody want to contribute from the audience or ask any questions of our panel?
I'd be interested to hear from land agents. I can see a couple on the screen about the land prices and what they're finding.
Okay, don't hide, land agents, please. Please take part. Deafening silence from them, right?
But I'd like to ask a question of William then, because managing volatility you've been doing for years with a lot of our clients now, with the fluctuations, the large fluctuations in wheat price and milk price, and they're struggling a little bit to understand how to manage risk. Are there any tips you've got from on that score?
So were you asking me, Mark?
I was actually, yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. Managing risk. Oh. I'm not sure how to answer that really. I mean, I suppose we manage risk all the time by, I mean, what we actually do, we grow crops ourselves, but we also work with other farmers. So we try and source our crops from different parts of the country to cover weather events and things like that. And yeah, we have different pricing mechanisms to try and protect risk. Yeah, I don't know what more to say. I mean, our business and our sector has become so sort of lean over the years. I look back and think, you know, we used to employ a lot more people doing lots of nice things like marketing, and but we've really cut it right to the bone, because we're mainly producing for supermarket own label, and they've just driven it down and down. I think the way we manage risk, I suppose, is by the way we source crops. As I say, we have different parts of the country. We don't grow it all ourselves. We try and make sure that we've got a sale for everything we produce. So a bit different to arable farming. We do actually grow. We work out exactly what we think we can sell, and we buy and grow to meet that program. And we take a bit of a judgment. So often we'll grow, we'll procure sort of 90% of what we need and take a gamble on 10%. Or sometimes if we fancy that the job's going to be short, we'll go a bit the other way. So yeah, I mean, and then with most of our costs, we try and hedge. So we use a lot of packaging, and the price of packaging tends to be linked to oil prices. So we hedge against that. We hedge against foreign currency. We do, because we do some importing as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's something I haven't thought of. I wasn't really prepared for that one, but
sorry.
Has that been helpful?
That's helpful, yeah. I mean, I think what we're finding on the standard commodities, certainly the milk, is that they drive the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's want to know the variable costs of production, and they want to be driving the price down, like has been happening in vegetables for many years.
Yeah.
And the farmers aren't particularly keen to share the knowledge of their costs of production, but to get the contracts for the higher prices, they've got to do that.
Yeah, well, I think the way we have managed to drive our prices down over the years is by increasing our scale. With the suppliers consolidated massively. I mean, there's only sort of, I don't know, 5 or 6 big carrot producers now. I think when I started, there was probably 50. And I think the same in most vegetable crops, that the number of producers has reduced, and they're sweating the asset. They're doing more with the same overheads, basically. And I think, that is what probably needs to happen in dairy. But of course, you've got lots of these. I mean, I don't really understand the dairy industry, but I'm sure you understand it better than me. But there's lots of small producers in, especially in some of the sort of more the hillside counties, and it's actually very difficult for them to do what we've done in vegetables, without completely changing the rural economy in those areas.
It brings us on to the role of the small farm. There's got to be small farms continuing. Quite what level of support they have from the government is, again, this crossroads that we're at.
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room is that, you know, we've had the EU subsidies, and I think UK government thought, you know, they could get food production without continuing those subsidies. But I think the reality is, if we want to keep the rural economies as they are, then they have to be subsidised. I also think, you know, the sustainability agenda, I think we're scratching the surface at the moment, and the only way we can really achieve net zero will be with a lot of government help, because, you know, in our business, if we became net zero tomorrow, I'm not sure we could, but if we got somewhere close to it, it would mean we were uncompetitive commercially. So somebody's got to pay for it, and that's the problem.
I suppose leads me on to, I was going to sort of finish up when hoping each of you find some sort of positive note, but I'm not, from what you've said, I'm not sure we can. So maybe the different question is, ideally, what would you like from, each of you would like to see from government that would make a difference? And I know we're not supposed to be political here, but, you know, what measures do you think would make a difference to our capability to grow food in these islands?
I think one of the biggest problems is there's no joined up thinking between the environmental schemes and actual food production. I think it needs to be done by one department, and they need to look at the whole thing in the rounds, the whole land use of the UK, rather than just looking at one issue in isolation. So environmental schemes need to be consistent with increasing food production. At the moment, they're completely in conflict. And the same with producing green energy is in conflict with food production. So, yeah, I think I don't really, don't know what else I can say really.
Okay.
Right, I think that's right. I completely agree with that. I think I do hear discussions, rumours, especially in the ALA, that there will be food production will start to get back onto the agenda, and there just needs to have a balance emerge. That exactly what you said. They just need to be doing it as a whole rounded aspects of it. And when you get the example of the mid-tier schemes, you know, paying well enough to get, I've got one client that's, you know, the whole farm's in there, and it just, you just think that there needs to be that joined up approach of what you're actually encouraging and what you're subsidising for.
Mark, any comments on that?
Unmute. Yeah, I think, well, Amy said it in her earlier piece about farmers will chase the money. So whatever subsidies become available in the future, people will restructure and try and chase that sort of thing. But I think we touched on it earlier, the small farmers, I do feel, need support. I mean, the definition of a small farmer is very difficult, but certainly the ones on the western side of the country and the hillsides, there needs to be a separate mechanism for them to continue to use the land and provide the public good for public, public money for public good. So, and going back to what I support what Amy and William have said about food production, we need to get some sort of it back on the political agenda more.
Yeah. So, well, I think really we probably can't leave it on a high note, because there isn't one. It is a tough area for agriculture generally, and I know from our point of view, it's nice to think that there'd be nice, interesting technical inventions to solve all the problems. But sadly, whilst the technical inventions may solve minor problems, and they do enable farmers in some cases to do things which to use their resources more efficiently, but that is only scratching the surface, really, and there are far greater issues that need to be dealt with. As you say, joined up thinking is really the key to it, and we hope that we shall see some eventually. If there are no further questions from the audience, I think I'll sort of bring it to a close on that point. And thank you very much to Amy, to William, and to Mark for their time and their thoughts on this matter. I think it's been a very interesting discussion, possibly a little bit dispiriting for farmers, I guess, to think that there are more problems than solutions. But anyway, thank you all for attending. And if you have any afterthoughts as to questions and so on, please do get in touch, and we'll see if we can pass those on. So again, thanks very much, and I think I shall bring the matter to a close at that point. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.